Princess Lyra stood at the observation window of the diplomatic shuttle, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. The planet looked beautiful from space with its blue oceans and white clouds, but she felt no joy at the sight. This world would be her new home, and the thought made her chest feel tight. "Your Highness, we will arrive in 20 minutes, said Sarah, her closest handmaiden and friend. Sarah had insisted on coming to Earth with her, refusing to let Lyra face this alone. Lyra nodded but did not turn away from the window. 20 minutes until I meet my future husband, she said quietly. A human. Sarah moved closer and placed a gentle hand on Lyra's shoulder. The treaty will bring peace to both our worlds. Your sacrifice is noble. Sacrifice, Lyra repeated the word with a bitter smile. That is exactly what this feels like. The Valorian Empire had been at war with humanity for 3 years. It had been a strange war, neither side gaining much ground. The Valorians had superior technology and ships, but humans fought with a stubborn determination that surprised everyone. They adapted quickly, learned from every battle, and refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. Finally, both sides agreed that peace was better than endless fighting. The treaty required many things, but the most important was a marriage between the Valorian royal family and a human representative. Lyra, as the Emperor's youngest daughter, had been chosen for this duty. The shuttle landed at a massive spaceport in what humans called New York City. Lyra stepped out onto the landing platform, her long silver robes flowing behind her. Her skin had a slight blue tint that marked her as Valorian nobility, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, colored like deep purple jewels. A delegation of humans waited to greet her. They all wore formal suits and dresses, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Lyra scanned their faces, wondering which one was Jake Harper, her future husband. Princess Lyra, welcome to Earth, said an older woman with gray hair. I am Ambassador Linda Martinez. On behalf of humanity, we are honored by your presence, Lyra gave a polite bow. The honor is mine, Ambassador. Allow me to introduce Jake Harper. The ambassador gestured to a man standing slightly behind her. Your betrothed. Jake stepped forward, and Lyra got her first real look at the man she would marry. He was tall for a human, with dark brown hair and calm gray eyes. His face was pleasant but not remarkable. He wore his formal suit well, and when he smiled, it seemed genuine. Princess Lyra, Jake said, bowing in the Valorian style. I have been studying your customs and language. I hope I can make this transition easier for you. Lyra was surprised that he spoke a few words in Valorian, though his accent was rough. She responded in English, which she had been learning for months. That is thoughtful, Mr. Harper. I appreciate your efforts. Please call me Jake, he said warmly. They were escorted to a large building where the wedding preparations were underway. The ceremony would take place in 3 days, giving barely any time for the couple to know each other. Lyra was given luxurious quarters in the diplomatic residence, with Sarah and her other attendants settling in nearby rooms. That evening, Jake came to her quarters for their first private meeting. They sat in a formal sitting room with Sarah standing discreetly in the corner as a chaperone. I know this is not what you wanted, Jake began carefully, an arranged marriage to a stranger from another world. I want you to know that I will do everything I can to make you comfortable. Lyra studied him carefully. He seemed sincere, but she had been taught to be cautious. What made you agree to this marriage? She asked directly. Jake was quiet for a moment. I believe in peace, he said finally. I have seen enough war. If my marriage to you can help end the fighting and save lives, then it is worth it. A noble answer, Lyra said, though her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced. Tell me about yourself. What do you do? I work in diplomatic security, Jake explained. I help protect embassies and important visitors. Before that, I was in the military, but I left that life behind. You were a soldier? Lyra asked, interested despite herself. Yes, but that was a long time ago, Jake said quickly, as if eager to change the subject. Now I prefer to solve problems without fighting. I have been studying Valorian history and culture for the past 6 months. Your civilization's achievements in art and science are remarkable. Lyra softened slightly. At least he had made an effort to learn about her people. What do you know about Valorian history? She challenged him. Jake smiled and began to speak about the founding of the Valorian Empire, the great philosophers and artists of their culture, and the technological advances that made them one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. He spoke for nearly 10 minutes, showing impressive knowledge. When he finished, Lyra nodded slowly. You have studied well. I am surprised. I wanted to understand the woman I would marry, Jake said simply. Your people have a rich and complex history. I find it fascinating. Despite herself, Lyra felt a small measure of respect for this human. He was trying, at least. But respect was not the same as acceptance. She was still being forced to marry beneath her station, to bond with a species that her people considered primitive and weak. Over the next 2 days, Lyra and Jake met several more times. Jake was always patient and kind, answering her questions about Earth and human culture. He took her to see some of the city, showing her human art museums and gardens. He seemed to genuinely want her to feel welcome. But Lyra noticed things that confirmed her people's views about humans. They were physically weaker than Valorians, their technology was less advanced, and their society seemed chaotic and disorganized. Jake himself, while intelligent, seemed too soft and gentle. He never raised his voice, never showed anger or aggression. To Lyra, this meant he lacked the strength that Valorian warriors possessed. On the evening before the wedding, Lyra sat with Sarah and her other handmaidens in her quarters. They were all young Valorian women who had come to Earth to serve the princess. What do you think of your future husband? Asked Mira, one of the handmaidens. Lyra sighed. He is kind and educated. He treats me with respect, but... Sarah prompted, knowing there was more. But he is so weak, Lyra said quietly. He is gentle and soft-spoken. I have seen no fire in him, no strength. How can I respect a husband who seems more like a scholar than a warrior? The other women nodded in understanding. In Valorian culture, strength and courage were highly valued. Warriors were honored above all others. A man who avoided conflict was seen as lacking virtue. Perhaps humans are just different, Sarah suggested gently. Their ways may not be our ways. Different or inferior? Lyra asked bitterly. I am a princess of the Valorian Empire. I should have married a great warrior, someone worthy of my station. Instead, I am given to a human who works in security and probably has never seen real combat. The wedding day arrived with grand ceremony. The venue was decorated with both human and Valorian symbols, attempting to blend the two cultures. Thousands of guests attended, including dignitaries from dozens of worlds. This wedding represented more than just a marriage. It was a symbol of peace between two civilizations. Lyra wore a stunning gown that combined Valorian and human wedding traditions. The fabric shimmered with colors that shifted when she moved, and jewels from her homeworld sparkled in her hair. She looked every bit the royal princess. Jake wore a formal military dress uniform, which surprised Lyra. She had not seen him in uniform before. He looked more impressive this way, standing straight and tall with medals on his chest that she did not understand. Still, she reminded herself that uniforms and medals did not make a warrior. The ceremony itself was long and elaborate, with rituals from both cultures. Lyra spoke her vows in English and Jake spoke his in Valorian, though his accent made some of the guests smile. When it was done, they were officially married, and the crowd erupted in applause. At the reception, Lyra sat beside Jake at the high table watching the guests celebrate. Various ambassadors and officials came to offer their congratulations. Jake was gracious with everyone, making conversation and showing genuine interest in the guests. Lyra noticed that while many people seemed to like Jake, the Valorian nobles treated him with barely concealed condescension. They were polite, but their body language showed what they really thought. This human was beneath them, unworthy of a princess. Your husband seems very civilized, said Commander Dax, a high-ranking Valorian military officer, as he approached their table. His tone made it clear that civilized was not a compliment. I hope he will be able to protect you properly, Princess, Jake smiled calmly. I will do my best, Commander, Dax laughed. Of course, though I suspect the princess could protect herself better than any human could protect her. Our warriors train from childhood in combat. It is in our blood. Every culture has its strengths, Jake replied evenly, not rising to the bait. Dax moved away, still smiling in a superior way. Lyra felt embarrassed. Her own people were mocking her husband, and he just accepted it calmly. Why did he not defend himself? Why did he not show any pride or anger? Later in the evening, after the formal ceremonies were complete, Lyra excused herself and retired to their new shared quarters on the diplomatic station Concordia. This station orbited a neutral moon and would be their home, a place between Earth and the Valorian Empire. Jake Rima. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and life on Concordia Station had settled into a routine. The station was enormous, home to thousands of people from various worlds. It served as a neutral ground where different species could meet and work together on diplomatic matters. Lyra spent most of her days with other Valorian nobles who lived on the station. They held social gatherings, discussed politics, and maintained their cultural traditions. She had made an effort to be a good wife in practical terms, but her heart remained distant from Jake. Jake, for his part, never pushed her. He gave her space, treated her with constant respect, and worked long hours managing security for the station. They shared living quarters but lived almost separate lives. They were polite to each other, like friendly roommates rather than husband and wife. Sarah often tried to encourage Lyra to spend more time with Jake. "He is your husband," she would say. "Perhaps if you knew him better, you might feel differently." But Lyra was not interested. Jake was kind and considerate, but he was also predictable and boring. He went to work, came home, read books, and exercised. He never did anything exciting or impressive. He was exactly what she expected a human to be. One evening, Lyra was walking through the station's recreation level with Mira when they passed by the combat training facility. Through the large observation windows, they could see various people using the training equipment and simulation rooms. "Look," Mira said, pointing. "Is that not your husband?" Lyra looked and saw Jake entering one of the simulation rooms. She was curious despite herself. "Let us watch for a moment," she said. They moved to the observation window where several other people were already watching the simulations. Each room showed different combat scenarios in virtual reality. Most people were training for basic self-defense or fitness. Jake's simulation loaded and Lyra's eyes widened. The scenario was a military combat situation, far more intense than anything else being run in the facility. The simulation showed Jake armed with weapons, moving through a hostile environment filled with enemy targets. What shocked Lyra was how Jake moved. There was nothing soft or gentle about him now. He moved with precise efficiency, his actions smooth and practiced. He cleared rooms with professional skill, eliminated targets with accuracy, and showed tactical thinking that impressed even Mira, who came from a military family. "That is your husband?" Mira asked in disbelief. "He moves like a trained warrior." Lyra watched in silence. This was not the Jake she knew. This man in the simulation was dangerous, capable, and completely in control. When the simulation ended, Jake's score appeared on the display. It was extremely high, higher than the Valorian soldiers who had trained earlier that day. "Perhaps there is more to humans than we thought," Mira said quietly. Lyra did not respond. She was too confused by what she had just seen. Later that evening, Jake came home to their quarters. He looked the same as always, calm and friendly. He smiled when he saw Lyra reading on the couch. "Good evening," he said warmly. "How was your day?" Lyra set down her book. "I saw you training today," she said carefully. "In the combat simulator." Jake paused while removing his jacket. "Oh? I hope I did not embarrass myself." "You scored very high," Lyra said. "Higher than the Valorian soldiers who trained before you." Jake shrugged. "The simulator and I are old friends. I have been using it for years." "You said you left the military long ago," Lyra continued. "But you fight like someone who never stopped training." "I believe in staying ready," Jake said simply. "Security work requires certain skills. The training helps me do my job better." He was deflecting, Lyra realized. Not lying, but not telling her everything either. "What exactly did you do in the military?" she asked directly. "I served my country," Jake said, his smile fading slightly. "I did what was necessary during difficult times. But that life is behind me now. I prefer to use my skills to protect people rather than fight them." Before Lyra could press further, Jake excused himself to shower and change. The conversation was clearly over. Over the next few days, Lyra found herself paying more attention to Jake. She noticed things she had missed before. The way he moved through crowds, always aware of his surroundings, how his eyes constantly scanned rooms when he entered them, marking exits and potential threats. The respectful way that the station's security personnel treated him, not as a boss, but as someone they genuinely admired. She also noticed that Jake was always calm, even in situations that made others nervous. When a minor technical failure caused panic in one section of the station, Jake was the one who calmly directed people to safety and coordinated the repair efforts. He never seemed rattled or afraid. Lyra decided to investigate. She accessed the station's public records about Jake Harper. His official biography was brief. Born on Earth, served in the military with distinction, decorated for valor, transitioned to diplomatic security work after the war. Nothing specific about what he actually did during his service. She tried to access his military records, but they were sealed. Only high-level government officials could open them. This made Lyra even more curious. Why would a simple soldier's records be classified? 2 weeks after seeing Jake in the simulator, Lyra attended a formal dinner for military officers from various worlds. Commander Dax was there, along with several other Valorian officials. Jake attended as well since the event was held on Concordia Station. During the dinner, Dax drank too much of the Valorian wine and became loud and boastful. He began telling stories about the war between humans and Valorians, describing battles where Valorian forces had defeated human ships. The humans fought bravely, Dax said with a laugh, but they were no match for Valorian warriors. We won every major engagement. They only agreed to peace because they knew they could not win. Some of the other Valorian officers nodded in agreement. The human officers at the table looked uncomfortable but said nothing, trying to maintain diplomatic courtesy. Is that truly what happened? Jake asked quietly. His voice was calm, but something in his tone made everyone at the table turn to look at him. Dax smiled widely. Of course, Harper. Your people fought well for primitives, but you lacked our training and technology. It is no shame to lose to superior warriors. I was at the Battle of Centauri Station, Jake said, his gray eyes locked on Dax. Were you? Dax's smile faltered slightly. The Battle of Centauri Station was famous, a major engagement where a small human force had held off a much larger Valorian fleet for 3 days. I was assigned to a different sector, Dax said defensively, but I read the reports. The humans had defensive advantages. We had no advantages, Jake corrected him, still speaking in that calm, controlled voice. We were outnumbered 5-1. We had less advanced weapons. We should have been destroyed in hours. But we held that station because we understood something about humans that you still do not seem to grasp. And what is that? Dax asked, his tone becoming hostile. That humans do not quit, Jake said simply. We adapt, we learn. We find ways to win even when winning seems impossible. You had the better technology and training, Commander, but we had something you did not. We had absolute determination. The table was silent now. Lyra stared at her husband, seeing a side of him she had never witnessed. There was steel in his voice, and his calm gray eyes held something dangerous. Dax stood up angrily. Determination means nothing without skill and strength. Any Valorian warrior could defeat a human in single combat. Your species is physically weak. Jake remained seated, but everyone could feel the tension. Physical strength is only one type of power, Commander. I have no desire to prove anything to you. I am here for peace, not conflict. Because you are afraid, Dax taunted. You know you would lose. I know that fighting you would serve no purpose, Jake replied. But make no mistake, Commander. Fear is not what stops me. A human officer at the table, a woman named Captain Lisa Brown, spoke up. Commander Dax, perhaps you should research who Jake Harper was before making assumptions. His military record might surprise you. His records are sealed, Dax said dismissively, probably to hide his true performance. Captain Brown smiled grimly. They are sealed for security reasons, not shame. Jake Harper was one of the most decorated human soldiers in the war. He was part of the Special Operations Unit that, well, I probably should not say more. Dax looked uncertain now, realizing he might have made a mistake. But his pride would not let him back down. He turned and walked away from the table, muttering about humans and their arrogance. After the dinner ended, Lyra walked with Jake back to their quarters. She was silent, processing everything she had witnessed. You were defending your people tonight, Lyra said finally. I have never seen you like that. Dax was disrespecting brave soldiers who died in that battle, Jake said quietly. I could not let it pass. You scared him, Lyra observed. A trained Valorian warrior was scared of you. Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. Lyra, I have tried to be a good husband to you. I know you did not want this marriage, and I have not pushed you to feel something you do not feel. But there are parts of my past that I hoped you would never need to see. I left that life behind because I wanted peace, not because I was unable to fight. Who are you really, Jake Harper? Lyra asked, looking at him with new eyes. Before Jake could answer, the station's emergency. Lyra locked the door as Jake had instructed, her hands shaking. She could hear the sounds of combat growing louder throughout the station. Weapons fire, shouting, and the heavy footsteps of the Kryn pirates echoed through the corridors. The Kryn Consortium was notorious across the galaxy. They were not a unified government, but a loose alliance of pirate clans who raided ships and stations for profit. They were brutal, efficient, and feared by everyone who traveled through space. Lyra moved to the security terminal in their quarters and accessed the station's camera feeds. What she saw made her blood run cold. Kryn warriors, massive creatures covered in thick armor and carrying heavy weapons, were overwhelming the station's security forces. The regular guards, both human and Valorian, were falling back in disorder. She searched the feeds frantically until she found Jake. He was moving through a maintenance corridor, alone, carrying weapons she did not recognize. As she watched, 3 Kryn warriors entered the corridor from the other end, spotting him immediately. Lyra expected Jake to run or hide. Instead, he moved toward them. What happened next took only seconds, but Lyra watched it in frozen horror and amazement. Jake used the narrow corridor to his advantage, preventing the Kryn from surrounding him. He moved with incredible speed, firing his weapons with precise accuracy. When one Kryn got close, Jake used some kind of explosive device that sent the creature flying backward. Within moments, all 3 Kryn were down, and Jake was already moving to the next location. He had not hesitated, had not shown any fear. He fought like this was something he had done 1,000 times before. By the ancestors, Lyra whispered. What is he? She continued watching the feeds, seeing Jake move through the station like a ghost. He was not fighting the way Valorian warriors fought, with honor and direct confrontation. He was using strategy and tactics, setting traps, using the station's own systems against the invaders. He caused a power surge that disabled a group of Kryn, then ambushed them while they were confused. He sealed blast doors to separate enemy groups, then eliminated them one by one. Lyra switched to another camera and saw something that made her heart ache. A group of Valorian civilians, including children, were trapped in a dining hall. Kryn warriors were breaking through the door. The civilians huddled together in terror, knowing they were about to be captured or worse. Jake appeared from a service entrance behind the Kryn. He moved silently, taking down 3 of them before the others even realized he was there. The remaining Kryn turned to face him, but Jake had already thrown some kind of smoke device that filled the corridor. When the smoke cleared seconds later, all the Kryn were unconscious, and Jake was helping the civilians escape through the service tunnels. One of the Valorian children, a small girl, was crying. Jake knelt down and spoke to her gently, his voice calm and reassuring. The girl stopped crying and nodded. Jake picked her up and carried her while leading the other civilians to safety. Lyra felt something break inside her. This man, her husband, was protecting her people with his own life. He was doing it without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. He was not the weak, soft human she had thought him to be. He was something far more dangerous and far more honorable. On another part of the station, Sarah and several other handmaidens had been captured by the Kryn. Lyra watched in horror as they were forced into the main plaza, where the pirate leader, a massive Kryn named Vorgath, was gathering hostages. Vorgath was enormous, even by Kryn standards. He stood over 8 feet tall, covered in battle scars and wearing heavy armor decorated with trophies from past raids. He was the leader of the largest Kryn clan, feared throughout the sector. Bring all the important ones here, Vorgath ordered his warriors in a deep, rumbling voice. We will broadcast to their governments. Rich families pay well for their children's safety. Sarah looked terrified but tried to maintain her dignity. She was a noble's daughter, trained from birth to show courage even in fear. But Lyra could see her friend's hands trembling. Lyra activated the communication system in her quarters. Jake, she said urgently. They have Sarah and the others in the main plaza. The pirate leader is there. Jake's voice came back immediately. Stay in our quarters, Lyra. I will handle this. There are too many of them, Lyra protested. You cannot fight them all alone. I am not alone, Jake replied. Some of the security forces are regrouping. We have a plan, but you need to stay safe. Please trust me, the communication cut off. Lyra wanted to scream in frustration. How could she just sit here while her friends were in danger? While Jake was risking his life? She watched the security feeds as Jake met up with Captain Brown and about 20 other security personnel who had survived the initial attack. They gathered in a secure location, and Lyra could see Jake drawing diagrams and giving instructions. The others listened intently, nodding and understanding. Whatever Jake was planning, the other security officers trusted him completely. Captain Brown, a veteran soldier herself, clearly respected Jake's leadership. Lyra realized that everyone except her had known the truth about Jake Harper. They all knew he was not just a security officer, but something much more significant. The plan Jake had developed became clear as Lyra watched multiple camera feeds. The security team split into small groups, each with a specific task. Some groups created diversions, drawing Kryn warriors away from the plaza. Others set up ambushes along the corridors leading to the main areas. They were not fighting with brute force, but with careful coordination and tactical thinking. Jake himself moved toward the plaza, but he did not go directly. He used maintenance shafts and service corridors, getting into position above the plaza in the station's superstructure. Lyra lost sight of him for several minutes, her heart pounding with worry. In the plaza, Vorgath was growing impatient. His warriors had secured dozens of hostages, but they were facing more resistance than expected. Several of his teams had stopped reporting in. Something was wrong. "Find whoever is attacking my warriors," Vorgath commanded. "Bring them to me." One of his lieutenants approached nervously. "Commander, our squads in Section 7 and 12 are not responding. The ones in Section 9 reported being attacked by a single human before we lost contact." "A single human?" Vorgath laughed. "Impossible. Humans are weak creatures. Send more warriors. Kill anyone who resists." But Lyra knew better now. She knew that Jake was not weak and neither were humans. They simply fought differently, in ways that species like the Kryn did not understand or respect. She watched as Jake emerged from the shadows near the plaza's upper level. He had positioned himself where he could see everything but remain hidden. She saw him setting up equipment, preparing for something. Then Jake did something unexpected. He activated the plaza's communication system, and his voice echoed throughout the station. "Attention, Kryn forces. This is Jake Harper. You have attacked a diplomatic station and taken innocent people hostage. You have one chance to surrender and leave peacefully. If you refuse, I will make sure none of you leave this station alive." Vorgath laughed loudly. "Harper, I know this name. You are the human who married the Valorian princess. You think you can threaten me? I have 300 warriors on this station." "You had 300, Jake corrected calmly. "You now have about 230. I have been reducing your numbers for the past hour, and I am just getting started." The plaza fell silent. Vorgath's warriors looked at each other nervously. 230 meant that 70 of their comrades had been eliminated by the station's defenders. That was impossible, or was it? "Show yourself, little human," Vorgath demanded. "Stop hiding in the shadows like a coward." "I am not hiding," Jake replied. "I am in position. You just cannot see me because you do not know how to look." Vorgath roared in anger. "I will kill one hostage every minute until you surrender yourself." "Starting with this one." He grabbed Sarah, pulling her forward roughly. Lyra screamed even though no one could hear her. She watched helplessly as Vorgath held a weapon to Sarah's head. Her friend closed her eyes, preparing for death. But Jake's voice came again, now cold and hard. "Touch her and you will not live long enough to regret it." "Big words from a human," Vorgath sneered. "But you are too far away to stop me." "Am I?" Jake asked. Suddenly the lights in the plaza went out. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in dim red light. In that moment of confusion, Jake moved. Lyra watched in amazement as Jake dropped from the upper level, using some kind of cable to control his descent. He landed in the middle of the plaza, between Vorgath and Sarah. In his hands were weapons that glowed with energy. The Kryn warriors raised their weapons, but Jake was already moving. He fought with a speed and ferocity that shocked everyone watching. He used the environment, the shadows, even the hostages' positions to his advantage. He did not fight fair or honorably. He fought to win. Vorgath's warriors fell one after another. Jake seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from unexpected angles, using weapons and tactics the Kryn had never encountered. He threw devices that exploded with light and sound, disorienting the enemy. He moved through the darkness like he could see perfectly, while the Kryn stumbled and fired wildly. Captain Brown and her team burst into the plaza from multiple entrances, catching the Kryn in a... The plaza was silent except for the breathing of the two fighters. Vorgath towered over Jake, his massive form seeming to fill the space. His armor was scarred from countless battles, and his blade had the dark stains of blood from previous victims. He looked invincible. Jake stood calmly, his small knife held loosely in his hand. He looked tiny by comparison, vulnerable and weak. But there was something in his stance, in the way he moved, that made even Vorgath pause. "Last chance to run, human," Vorgath rumbled. "I have killed hundreds of warriors stronger than you." "Then one more should not be a problem," Jake replied evenly. Vorgath roared and charged. His massive blade swung down with enough force to cut Jake in half. But Jake was not there anymore. He had moved to the side with incredible speed, so fast that Vorgath's blade hit only empty air. Jake did not attack back. He simply moved away, watching and studying his opponent. Vorgath attacked again, and again Jake dodged. The massive Kryn was fast for his size, but Jake was faster. He moved like water flowing around each attack, never in the same place twice. "Fight me, coward!" Vorgath bellowed, frustrated. "I am fighting," Jake said calmly. "I am just doing it my way." Lyra watched from her quarters, her nails digging into her palms. She did not understand what Jake was doing. Why was he not attacking? Why was he just avoiding the strikes? But Captain Brown, watching from the plaza, smiled grimly. She understood. Jake was doing what humans did best. He was learning. Every attack Vorgath made, Jake was studying his speed, his reach, his patterns. He was gathering information. Vorgath swung his blade horizontally, trying to catch Jake from the side. This time, Jake did not move away. He moved forward, inside the arc of the blade where the weapon could not reach him. His knife flashed out, striking Vorgath's arm at a joint in the armor. It was a small cut, barely bleeding, but it proved something important. Jake could hurt him. Vorgath stepped back, looking at the cut in surprise. No one had gotten inside his guard that easily before. He attacked again, more carefully this time, but also with more anger. Jake continued his strategy. He dodged, studied, and occasionally struck when opportunities appeared. Each strike was small, aimed at joints and weak points in the armor. None of the cuts were serious, but they added up. Blood began to drip from a dozen small wounds on Vorgath's arms and legs. "You fight like an insect," Vorgath snarled, striking and running away. "Face me like a true warrior." "A true warrior wins," Jake replied. "How he wins does not matter." This enraged Vorgath further. In his culture, how you fought was as important as winning. Combat was about honor and strength. Jake's tactics were insulting to everything Vorgath believed. But Jake did not care about Kryn honor codes. He cared about protecting the people on this station. He cared about going home to Lyra. And he would do whatever it took to make that happen. Vorgath changed his strategy. Instead of trying to hit Jake with his blade, he used his size and weight. He charged forward, trying to grab Jake or knock him down. If he could get his hands on the small human, the fight would be over. Jake dodged the first charge, but Vorgath predicted this and swung his massive arm backward. The blow caught Jake in the ribs, sending him flying across the plaza. He hit the ground hard and rolled, trying to get up. Vorgath was on him instantly, his blade coming down in a killing strike. Jake rolled again, and the blade struck the metal floor where his head had been a moment before. Sparks flew from the impact. Jake got to his feet, holding his ribs. Lyra could see blood on his face where he had hit the ground. For the first time, Jake looked hurt, but his eyes were still focused, still determined. "First blood," Vorgath said with satisfaction. "You are tough for a human, but you cannot win. You are too small, too weak." Jake did not respond. He was breathing heavily, calculating his next move. The blow to his ribs had hurt badly. He might have cracked bones, but he could not show weakness now. Could not let Vorgath know he was injured. The fight continued, but now Jake was struggling. The injury slowed him down just enough that Vorgath's attacks came closer to connecting. One blade strike cut through Jake's sleeve, drawing a line of blood across his shoulder. Another caught his leg, making him stumble. Lyra stood up from her chair, unable to watch but unable to look away. Her husband was losing. He was going to die in front of everyone, and there was nothing she could do. "Jake," she whispered to the empty room. "Please, please do not die." In the plaza, Sarah was crying. The other hostages watched in horror. Even Captain Brown looked worried. This was not going according to plan, but Jake was not done yet. Humans had something that other species often failed to understand. They had the ability to keep fighting even when they should give up. They had an inner strength that came not from muscles or weapons, but from sheer determination. Vorgath sensed victory. He pressed his attack, driving Jake backward toward a wall. Once Jake was trapped with nowhere to dodge, the fight would be over. Jake let himself be driven backward. He made it look like he was getting desperate, like he was running out of options. Vorgath smiled under his helmet, certain of his victory. Then Jake moved. He had been waiting for this moment when Vorgath was confident and slightly careless. Jake used the wall to his advantage, pushing off it to gain momentum. He did not dodge away from Vorgath this time. He went toward him, moving faster than he had moved during the entire fight. Vorgath tried to bring his blade around, but Jake was already inside his guard. The small knife in Jake's hand struck 3 times in rapid succession, each strike precise and deadly. The first cut through the straps holding Vorgath's shoulder armor. The second found the gap at his neck. The third went into his armpit where major blood vessels ran. Vorgath roared in pain and dropped his blade, his arm suddenly not working properly. Jake had cut through a nerve cluster, paralyzing the massive arm. But Jake was not finished. He moved behind Vorgath, jumping onto his back, his legs wrapped around the Kryn's torso, and his knife went to Vorgath's throat. "Yield," Jake said quietly, his voice right next to Vorgath's ear. "Or I end this now." Vorgath struggled, trying to throw Jake off. But Jake held on with strength born of desperation and determination. The knife pressed harder against Vorgath's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "Yield," Jake commanded again, louder this time. Vorgath's struggles slowed. He could feel the blade at his throat. He knew that one quick movement from Jake would kill him. For the first time in his long life as a warrior, Vorgath felt true fear. "I yield," he gasped finally. "I surrender." Jake held the position for a moment longer, making sure Vorgath was serious. Then he released the Kryn and dropped to the ground. He stumbled backward, his injured ribs making him gasp in pain. Vorgath fell to his knees, holding his bleeding arm. He looked at Jake with something like respect in his eyes. "You fought well, human. I underestimated your species." Captain Brown and her security team immediately moved in, securing Vorgath and the remaining Kryn warriors. Medical personnel rushed forward to help Jake, but he waved them away. "Help the hostages first," he insisted. "Make sure Sarah and the others are okay." Sarah ran to Jake, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she said. "You saved all of us." Jake gave her a tired smile. "Just doing my job." But Sarah shook her head. "No, you risked your life for us, for Valorians. You are not just doing your job. You are a true warrior." Other hostages came forward, Valorians who had looked down on humans just hours before. Now they looked at Jake with awe and respect. This human had defeated a legendary Kryn commander in single combat. He had protected them when their own security forces had failed. Commander Dax, who had mocked Jake at the dinner, stood in the crowd of rescued hostages. He looked at Jake with new eyes, seeing what he had been too arrogant to see before. Jake Harper was not a weak diplomat playing at being a warrior. He was a warrior who chose to pursue peace. The station's main security forces finally breached the pirate blockade and retook full control. The remaining Kryn warriors were captured or had fled back to their ships. The raid was over, ended by a small group of defenders led by one determined human. Medical personnel insisted on treating Jake's injuries. He had 3 cracked ribs, multiple cuts and bruises, and a mild concussion. But he refused to go to the medical center until every hostage had been checked and every Kryn warrior had been secured. Finally, exhausted and hurting, Jake made his way back to his quarters. He moved slowly, each step causing pain from his injured ribs. His uniform was torn and bloody, and he looked nothing like the neat, composed man who had left these rooms hours ago. When he reached the door, he found it already open. Lyra stood in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She had watched everything on the security feeds. She had seen him fight, seen him risk his life, seen him nearly die. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Lyra stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Jake, careful of his injuries. She held him tightly, her body shaking with emotion. "You came back," she whispered. "I thought I was going to lose you." Jake gently returned the embrace, one hand stroking her hair. "I promised I would protect you. I keep my promises." "I was wrong about you," Lyra said, her voice breaking. "I was wrong about everything. I thought you were weak. I thought humans were weak. But you are the strongest person I have ever known. Strength C." The medical center was busy with injured people from the pirate attack. Doctors and nurses worked quickly, treating both serious and minor injuries. Jake had insisted that everyone else be treated first, so by the time a doctor could see him, several hours had passed. Lyra sat beside Jake's medical bed, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested she get some rest. She held his hand while they treated his cracked ribs, stitched his cuts, and ran scans to check for internal injuries. "You are lucky," the doctor, a human woman named Dr. Helen Ross, said as she examined the results. "No internal bleeding, no serious damage. You will be sore for a few weeks, but you will heal completely." "Thank you, doctor," Jake said, wincing as she wrapped his ribs in supportive bandaging. Dr. Ross looked at Lyra. "Make sure he rests. He has a tendency to ignore his injuries and go right back to work." "I will make sure he rests," Lyra promised firmly. After the doctor left, Sarah came to visit. Her face still showed the fear she had experienced, but she was safe and unharmed. She approached Jake's bed and, to everyone's surprise, performed a deep, Valorian bow of respect, the kind usually reserved for high-ranking warriors. "Jake Harper," Sarah said formally, "you saved my life. You saved all our lives. I owe you a debt that I can never repay." Jake looked uncomfortable with the formal honor. "You owe me nothing, Sarah. I am glad you are safe. You defeated Vorgath the Destroyer in single combat," Sarah continued. "Do you know what this means? Vorgath has raided across a dozen systems for 20 years. Hundreds of warriors have tried to stop him. All failed. But a human using only a knife defeated him. I was lucky," Jake said modestly. "No." Sarah shook her head. "You were skilled. I watched the entire fight. You used tactics we have never seen before. You turned his strength against him. You fought like... She struggled to find the right words. "Like a human." Lyra finished quietly. "He fought like a human." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding. "I have learned something today. We Valorians have much to learn from humans. We thought you were weak because you preferred peace. We thought your kindness was cowardice. We were wrong." Over the next few days, as Jake recovered, Lyra noticed how differently people treated him. The Valorian nobles who had looked down on him now showed respect. The human security personnel who had always liked him now looked at him with clear admiration. Even Commander Dax came to visit, though he looked uncomfortable. "Harper," Dax said stiffly, "I owe you an apology. I said things at the dinner that were disrespectful and wrong. You are a warrior worthy of respect." Jake nodded. "Apology accepted, Commander. We all have things to learn about each other." After Dax left, Lyra asked Jake about his past. "Will you tell me now?" "About what you did in the war?" Jake was quiet for a long time. Then he began to speak, his voice soft but steady. "I was part of a special operations unit. We did missions that regular soldiers could not do. Deep infiltration, sabotage, rescuing captured personnel. We operated behind enemy lines, often for weeks at a time with no support. That is why your records are sealed," Lyra said, understanding. "Because the missions were secret," Jake nodded. "Many of the things we did are still classified. But I can tell you that I saw a lot of combat. More than most soldiers see in their entire career. I was good at it. Too good, maybe. I could predict enemy movements, plan strategies, stay calm under pressure. But you hated it," Lyra observed. "I did what was necessary," Jake said carefully. But war takes something from you, especially the kind of war I fought. You see terrible things. You do terrible things. When the peace treaty was signed, I was relieved. I wanted to use my skills to protect people instead of fighting them. Why did you agree to marry me? Lyra asked. You could have retired, lived peacefully on Earth. Jake looked at her directly. Because I believed in the peace treaty. I thought if I could help bridge the gap between our species, maybe the war would truly end. Maybe we could build something better than what we had before. And instead you got a wife who treated you with barely hidden contempt, Lyra said bitterly. You were honest about your feelings, Jake replied. I appreciated that. And I hoped that over time, as we got to know each other, things might change. They have changed, Lyra said firmly. I was a foolish, arrogant princess who thought she knew everything. You showed me how wrong I was. Jake reached out and took her hand. Lyra, you were not wrong to be angry about the arranged marriage. You were not wrong to have doubts about me, but I am glad that we have a chance now to build something real. Lyra squeezed his hand. I want that too. I want us to be true partners, not just two people forced together by politics. Over the following weeks, their relationship transformed completely. Lyra spent time with Jake, really getting to know him. She learned about his interests, his thoughts, his dreams for the future. She discovered that he loved human history, enjoyed cooking, and had a quiet sense of humor that she found endearing. Jake, in turn, opened up more about himself. He showed Lyra parts of his personality that he had kept hidden before. They laughed together, talked for hours, and slowly built the foundation of genuine affection and respect. One evening, Lyra asked Jake to teach her some human combat techniques. They went to the training facility and Jake showed her basic self-defense moves. He was patient and encouraging, never making her feel inadequate. The key is not to fight with pure strength, Jake explained. Use leverage, use speed, use your opponent's momentum against them. A smaller person can defeat a larger one if they fight smart. Lyra practiced the techniques, and for the first time, she felt like she understood the human approach to combat. It was not about honor or glory. It was about effectiveness and survival. Your people have been warriors for a long time, Lyra observed, but you hide it well. Jake nodded. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned to be very good at war. But we also learned that war destroys everything it touches, so we try to find other ways to solve problems. But we never forget how to fight. We cannot afford to. Meanwhile, word of Jake's victory over Vorgath spread throughout the sector. The story grew in the telling, becoming a legend. A human warrior with only a knife had defeated the infamous pirate commander. It changed how many alien species viewed humanity. The Valorian High Council requested a formal report about the incident. Lyra was asked to address the council via holographic communication. Jake sat beside her during the transmission, still recovering from his injuries. Lyra stood before the council, composed and confident. She had spent days preparing what she would say, knowing that this moment was important for both human and Valorian relations. Honored Council, Lyra began, I come before you to report on the pirate attack on Concordia Station and to speak about what I have learned regarding our human allies. The council members, dozens of high-ranking Valorians, listened with serious expressions. Her father, Emperor Theron, sat at the center, his face unreadable. When I was sent to marry Jake Harper, I believed I understood humans, Lyra continued. I thought they were a primitive species that we were helping by forming an alliance. I thought my husband was a gentle scholar, incapable of true strength. She paused, letting her words sink in. I was completely wrong. Murmurs went through the council. Lyra continued, her voice strong and clear. During the pirate attack, my husband and a small group of human security personnel defended this station against 300 Kryn warriors. They used tactics we have never seen, strategies that turned the enemy's strength against them. Jake Harper personally rescued dozens of Valorian civilians, including children, putting his own life at risk. Lyra pulled up security footage on the holographic display. The council watched in silence as Jake fought through the station, protected hostages, and finally defeated Vorgath in single combat. Jake Harper is a decorated veteran of the human military, Lyra explained. He was part of an elite special operations unit during the war. He has more combat experience than most of our own warriors, but he chose to leave that life behind to pursue peace, not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to choose a different path. Emperor Theron leaned forward. Daughter, what are you saying? That humans are more dangerous than we realized? No, father, Lyra replied. I am saying that humans are more complex than we realized. They are capable of great violence when necessary, but they choose peace when possible. They value life and will fight to protect the innocent. They are not primitive or weak. They are warriors who have learned wisdom. She turned to look at Jake, who sat quietly beside her. My husband saved Valorian lives without hesitation. He defeated a legendary enemy to protect my friend. He did all this while recovering from injuries that would have hospitalized most Valorian soldiers. And then he insisted on making sure everyone else was cared for before accepting medical treatment himself. Lyra faced the council again. We have made a mistake in how we view humanity. We saw their diplomatic nature as weakness. We saw their preference for peace as inability to fight. But the truth is that humans are one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, precisely because they choose not to show it. They have learned to control their warrior nature, to use it only when necessary. That takes a kind of strength that we have not achieved. Commander Dax, who was present via holographic link,